Afternoon all. Let's have a look at a critical round 11 game between the mighty Veselin Topalov 2752 and his grandmaster opponent Eduardo Iturrizaga 2627 of the Venezuelan team. So Bulgaria meets Venezuela. Veselin starts off with d4, then we see knight f6, hypermodern, not occupying the centre, c4, e6, as though the Nimzowitsch engine could be entered into if knight c3 and bishop b4, but no, we saw knight f3, which is Queen's Indian territory. b6, g3, fianchettoing the bishop is very logical here. Bishop a6 is one of black's many ideas. The pawn is protected with queen c2. We see bishop b4 check, bishop d2, and now c5. Very interesting, accepting the possibility of the double pawns, which might give black some dynamic play. You can imagine c4, for example, is going to be the subject of a frontal attack later. And with the queen placed there, you might think that frontal attack could be quite accelerated. But anyway, Veselin does take on b4 after c takes. Okay, knight bd2, which does support c4, and also it implies that e4 is on the cards here. Black plays now the move knight c6, which immediately carries the possibility of rook c8 with it, and perhaps a move like knight a5, just targeting c4. But I suppose black has to be concerned of a natural support b3 here. e4 is played, and interestingly, black castles here, not worried about e5. And after bishop d3, it seems the e5 threat also carries with it the possibility of winning the h7 pawn. But a very interesting continuation by black here. You might think, is black concerned about this e5 and bishop h7? But no, black plays rook c8. He makes it into a pawn sacrifice. So is this a very dangerous concept? Well, Veselin plays e5 anyway and accepts the invitation here after knight e8 to win that h7 pawn. So he's lost a bit of time, he's a bit decentralized. His queen is still a target on this c file, and it looks potentially quite dangerous, black's pressure here. But also you'll note that this g3 means f3 is a bit weaker than usual. So an opening up with f6 might expose also some other weaknesses along the f file. So bear these two ideas in mind. Topalov takes time to put the bishop back, and now we see d5 striking immediately at the c4 pawn. But of course there is the en passant option, but surely that would just allow black to develop and put more piece pressure back on c4. Veselin does though go for that, sacrificing that head of his pawn chain. So after knight takes d6, we have some more possibilities opened up. The e5 was a kind of shield on this diagonal for queen f6 to stop queen f6, and now d4 is a potential target, and we see that implication here. After castles, black plays queen f6. So has black got sufficient pressure for the pawn sacrifice? You might think, well, there's a weakness here. This d4 is a bit loose. The queen's on the c file. Surely there's compensation here. In fact, let's engine check this position. What does an engine reckon of this position? Still thinks white's doing okay? Okay. Veselin's move is very interesting here. c5. The engine had flicked this on at some point there. c5, attacking the knight, attacking the bishop. But this pawn is behind the queen, and actually that's subject to being pinned here. Black creates that pin, knight takes d4, hitting the queen. But this bishop's loose, so what's going on here? Can white not just take here? And then if queen takes, take on a6. Well, white does take on d4. But black doesn't have to play queen takes d4 or bishop takes d3, it would seem that black can inject rook takes c5, attacking Veselin's queen. And now if the queen moves, then this looks very interesting for black. If the queen moves, for example, to b3, there might be the possibility of rook a5 hitting, pardon me, not the possibility, so I'm thinking queen a4, there's rook a5. Queen b3 though, let's check this position. In the game, a very interesting move was played by Veselin. Actually, I wonder if you can guess what was played if I give you 10 seconds starting from now. Okay. The in-between move rook c5 is kind of punished now with bishop takes a6, offering the queen, basically getting 3 pieces for it. So rook takes c2, knight takes c2, 3 pieces for the queen. Let's do a raw material count. If we treat rooks as 5, 10, 13, 16, 19. Let's call the queen 9, 14, 17. Black would be a bit short here, but pawn situation, black's a pawn up, so maybe you think it's roughly okay on material. But why didn't white consider other options here? Let's just quickly rule out queen b3 before we go into the game continuation. On queen b3, let's check this out. What is going on here? Bishop takes d3, not minding the queen protecting the knight, because now there's rook d5. After knight b3, there's knight f5. And trying to keep that piece is probably not helping with the rooks doubling here. And I guess here the piece is dropping off. d4 is dropping off. The engine's giving queen a6. So this is quite cunning stuff from black. If this had been envisaged, where black would be doing very well here, or at least equal. But all of this was avoided by the queen sacrifice. So after this move, rook takes c5. We have bishop takes a6. So let's go into this. Queen takes b2, picking up another pawn. So quite a few pawns here for black. 2 extra pawns up. And can white coordinate? That's a big question. Plays rook fc1 and we see rook d8. So what does white do here? Interestingly, he's not interested in moving any piece here. In fact, well, moving the knight, he's going to lose this knight. Moving this knight might allow or invite knight e4. The move played was king g2. Let's have a quick check at other moves which might be natural here to consider. King g2 has actually given us a very strong move by the engine on brief analysis. If we played knight f3, then knight e4 indeed, as I mentioned, the weakness of that last move, pouncing in there, kind of pins this knight to f2. And here, if king g2 here, g5 very aggressive intentions. It looks quite aggressive for black. And if black can get that f-file pressure, it looks quite dangerous. But the move played maybe so is liked here, king g2, keeping an eye for a moment longer on the e4 square. So this knight can't step into e4. g6 is played. Now knight b3 is played, inviting knight e4, and the invitation is accepted. But here, bishop b7, hitting the knight. The knight goes to c5. What is the difference there, you might ask? Hold on a sec. You might ask, well, why couldn't in this position, if we have knight e4 not doing much here, couldn't we have played that there? On knight b3, knight e4, and trying to evict this knight with bishop b7. It's slightly different. Positioning of the king is subtle here in the variation, because knight c3 now looks as though it's threatening knight e2 check. And if king g2, I guess there's some disaster lurking. Knight a2, and these pieces are all pretty loose. So a little subtlety, basically improving that king position as a sort of form of prophylaxis in this position as well. So again, it's knight e4 to c3. So the intention is to move this to give black e4, but not with such immediately dangerous consequences with the king on g2. Okay, let's follow now. So knight e4. Okay, and now with knight c3 not being so attractive, in fact there might be knight takes b4 in that position. Black plays knight c5, hitting the bishop. The queen is attacked, it moves. Now this bishop goes back to f3, another point of the king g2 to support that bishop coming back to that very nice square protected by the king. And now some simplification, which you might think is going to be favouring white intuitively, you might think, as there's less black resources. There's only rook and queen now. Can they really coordinate against white's king? Knight e3, it looks as though white's also getting centrally organised. His pieces look good. Queen d4 though carries with it the threat clearly of queen takes e3. Now the pin is released with king g1. The king goes back. It's done its job of supporting that bishop, and now doesn't want to be a tactical target with this queen e3. So queen f6 hitting the bishop, and actually we get some cat and mouse. The king goes back, queen d4, but now white changes here with rook c8 check, and now decides to protect the knight with rook e1. We see a5. Can black's pawns actually do something significant here in time before white really goes for an attack? We see knight g4 now, and you might think, what is the actual threatened resource here? Knight g4 protects f2, and it might make way for something like rook e4, you might think, but let's be very precise and sure what the exact threat is, because it seems black suffered some sort of bad reaction to this, weakening, compromising his king safety by playing f5. So why would black have to play f5, opening up his second rank? Why was this played? I propose we put in a token move like b5 to see what is white's threat. Okay, rook c7 has given us, it's about equal. I think the threat here is rook e6 now. Now if king f8 is played, if queen d6, then we have rook b7, as though white's getting some sort of advantage. If king f8, it looks as though again rook c1, and white is again getting something, but it's technically about equal. So this is interesting. So this f5 is also looking good here for black from an engine point of view. That's interesting. So even though the second rank is apparently weakened, king f8, knight e3. Now maybe, I don't know, intuitively this might be a sort of mistake. The queen looks very, very nice in the center here, striking in all directions, but it's actually moved now with queen b2. Okay, the immediate threat of rook f2 also hitting this pawn. Could this be actually though classed as a mistake in this position? Hold on a sec. Is queen b2, it seems decentralizing. No, it's actually a liked move. And we have rook f1 and then b5, and it looks as though from an engine point of view black's doing still well. So let's take our investigation a little bit later than this. For the moment, black has a lot of pressure, and he's also getting pressure with these pawns. This pawn mass is coming down to create potentially two connected passed pawns. So rook b7 looks as though it's aimed at those passed pawns, and will these rooks ever coordinate ever again with black controlling c1, that c1 square? We see queen c3. A move like queen takes b3, we see that rook c1 is going to be very useful, perhaps threatening rook c8, mating. Okay, so we see rook b7, queen c3, and now again this threat of queen takes e3 has emerged. Rook e1 protecting the knight, and now a4 trying to create the two connected passed pawns, and in fact that happens. B takes, b takes. So is white in big trouble here? Very interesting. Knight d1 hitting the queen, and also e6. Okay, so a double attack. Queen b3 protecting e6, and also attacking potentially d1, as though this rook is having to help protect d1. But in fact, in this position, an invasive move is played. I wonder if you can guess it. What white's play? If I give you 10 seconds here, what does white play in this position, starting from now? Okay, white tries to get his rook in. He plays rook e5, a rook left of sorts. You can either go here or here to try and get back into the back row here to deliver a checkmate. Rook d8 is played. Rook eb5 hitting b4. If black loses that b4 pawn, that's going to be bad news. Rook d4, and now the knight steps into e3. a3 only 2 steps away, but a very cruel looking move is played in this position, again to do with black's vulnerable back row, and a kind of weakness of the last move factored in, because that rook was protecting the back row. It's just come from there. So how can white try and exploit the black row? That's back row of black. So that's the question, and it's the final move of the game. I wonder if you can guess it. A nice, neat looking move here. 10 seconds from now. Okay, white plays knight d5, and black thinks this is so powerful, resigns. Well, let's look at it simply. If e takes, then I guess rook a5 offers very little defensive resource for black. Let's just engine check. Doesn't look as though it needs to be engine checked, but you never know sometimes. So takes, yes, rook a5 will do. Massive advantage if black's having to sacrifice the queen. What else? Rook takes d5, just bishop takes d5. And if takes, we get the same thing. And if the queen tries to help like this, well, again, it's devastating. The queen's going to have to sacrifice. These two pawns, I guess, are not matching the rook, especially after the rook takes b4. So this is a hopeless position, this interruption. Where did black go wrong is the question. Where did black go wrong indeed? We saw that black had the advantage technically here. Queen c3, still black had the advantage. a4, still black had the advantage. Now when this queen was attacked, queen b3, starting to get a bit shaky for some reason after queen b3, as though it's equal now with rook e5. So black has to play precisely. He plays rook d8, and now white has the advantage. If he had played a3, I think a3 is now failing. This needs very high precision. If rook takes d1, bishop takes, queen takes, rook a5, Queen D8, Rook 8 A7. I think we're going to get a perpetual check position. We get a perpetual check position. I don't think black can risk anything else. If he goes here, then it's winning for white with Rook H7. So it'll be a perpetual check scenario. So that was maybe one of black's better chances. It seems this knight came back with a vengeance. It should have been eliminated according to the engine here. Rook takes D1 to eliminate the knight and just try and hold for the draw. But by black allowing the knight to come in, now it starts to look very dangerous after knight E3. But even stronger, knight E3 is actually given a very strong move here. After A3, the very strong move knight D5. So the rooks are just blasting through and coordinating on those 7th and 8th ranks. It's quite a brilliant final display. The invasion of the rooks, cooperation of the rooks. The knight coming with a vengeance from that seemingly passive square back to interrupt this rook, helping the back row. So an interesting game. Let's have a look in overview and summary. A very interesting game because black sacrificed, the H7 pawn as a kind of gambit for piece pressure. Very dynamic position indeed. And this kind of Veselin rook takes C5 instead of the ordinary recapture. It's interesting how it was punished in inverted commas with this queen sacrifice. Still very difficult position to assess. Very interesting move King G2, kind of prophylaxis against particular variations of knight E4 C3 to E2 if the bishop does belong on F3. The bishop on F3 is a very nice position for that bishop. So we get that re-manoeuvring of the bishop to F3 pretty shortly. And then this bit of cat and mouse here with this threat of Queen E3. And now white decides, no, he doesn't want to draw here. So he goes for a win. He goes check and he protects with this one. But it looks as though it's a dangerous position because of this 3-1 going to be 2-0. Pawn majority, 2 connected past pawns. The threats here, basically, like Rook C7, Rook E6, probably concern black enough to play F5 and allow that weakening. Okay. And now again, black apparently was, going for it and had a dangerous looking position, very dangerous for these passed pawns here. And white getting this rook infiltration, this starts to turn the tide. To at least give white a draw in hand in the variations of rook takes D1. But even better now, black starts to blunder, it seems. So black loses that opportunity to eliminate the knight, and then the knight is now dangerous. Actually, let's check. Instead of A3 knight D5, could the rook have helped here, or is this knight actually very strong now? If say rook D8. Okay, rook takes B4 is the problem now. And the knight could actually come in. Knight C4. Or even rook H4 looks strong here. Wow, with rook H8. And if king G8, rook H6, it looks as though the rooks are coordinating here very well. So this looks quite crushing. Okay. So in the game we see a key interrupting move after A3, this major interruption, knight D5, just to stop any defense on the back row. Black resigned. Interesting game from Veselin. He had a great rating performance actually, even though his team didn't do particularly well, but he held, he really did it very well overall for board 1 for Bulgaria, as expected by his rating. Comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much.